Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 4-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 2-year-old named Mia. Now, let's have some real talk for just a moment here. Parenting is one of the hardest jobs that you will ever have in your entire life. And being a Montessori parent who uses positive discipline strategies, respectful parenting practices, it can often feel a little overwhelming because you know in your own heart that there is a better way than the way many of us were raised when it comes to discipline. And so sometimes it can be really hard to figure out exactly how you're supposed to keep your cool when your buttons are really being pressed by your child. I know how it feels. I have been there. I am there every single day. And so from one busy parent to another, today I would like to share with you 5 ways that you can help yourself to stay calm as a parent. Okay, so I'd like to start off this video with a bit of a reality check, and that is the fact that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I am certainly not a perfect parent. Even in spite of all the things that I know I should be doing sometimes, I still find that I make mistakes with my own children, and that is just the nature of being human. But here's the good news. Your child doesn't need you to be a perfect parent. They need you to be the best parent that you can be, given the knowledge, tools, and resources that you have. And here's the even better news. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them going forward. Now, my favorite thing about being a Montessori parent is that this lifestyle really goes a long way in the prevention department, in preventing some of these major meltdowns that cause us to lose our cool constantly, primarily for a couple of different reasons. One of them being the independence piece. As a Montessori parent, we're constantly offering our children choices and giving them opportunities to do things independently so that they can feel empowered and autonomous. And that really helps to stifle the battle even before it begins a lot of the time. We're also constantly looking for ways to cooperate with our children, to work alongside them, as opposed to just being the dictator who tells everybody what to do. And a lot of that comes from our own perspective in seeing ourselves as our child's guide, as opposed to the disciplinarian figure. As Montessori parents, we strive to have very consistent routines from day to day and set very clear limits with our children so that they know what the expectations are and there aren't any surprises that could throw them off kilter. We also advocate for the use of positive discipline strategies and respectful parenting practices as opposed to the more traditional timeouts and punishments, so that definitely helps. And then of course, we do find a lot of joy in just spending quality time with our children in our normal everyday activities. And I think all of this tends to paint this very idealistic picture of Montessori children and Montessori homes as these very peaceful, loving environments without any yelling and perfect children doing everything that they're supposed to whenever they're asked without any question. And here's the second reality check for you. Montessori children are still children. They still have feelings and emotions. They go through the same developmental stages as any other child on the planet. So they still have tantrums. They still push our buttons. They still do things that make us second guess our very sanity every single day. That is par for the course, no matter what kind of a home you're raising children in. Now, even though a Montessori lifestyle has a multitude of these amazing benefits for you, your child, and your relationship together, you are inevitably still going to find yourself in situations at times where you are going to feel triggered, like you're about to lose your cool. And what do you do when that happens? This is truly one of the hardest parts of parenting, because we want to establish that respectful relationship with our child. We want them to be able to show us all of their emotions, no matter how ugly they may be. We want to be there for them, to be their rock and know that we've always got their back. And so we know we need to stay calm, but the question is, how exactly do I go about doing that? It requires a lot of work, inner work on our part to make it happen, especially if we ourselves were not raised with these same kinds of respectful parenting practices. So when our child is just completely losing it right there in front of us and we are forced to face the storm of their big emotions, it immediately tends to trigger our fight or flight response. We are operating from our reptilian brain, that part that doesn't really have thought or rationale to it. It's just your knee-jerk response, which often tends to come from what we know, which is how we ourselves were raised as children. So this really is some of the hardest work that we have to do as parents if we want to break out of the mold, break old habits, and establish something that is much more positive and respectful going forward. So again, I really want to be upfront with you guys about this. I am not a perfect parent. I absolutely lose my cool from time to time with my children, even though I don't want to and I don't mean to, and I know what I should be doing or saying in that moment. And at the same time, it's like an out-of-body experience. I'm like, why am I saying these things? Why am I reacting this way? But it still happens because we are human and we all make mistakes. But what I would like to share with you for today's video are some of the strategies that have helped me overcome reacting in that knee-jerk sort of way. These are the strategies that when I am able to control it and do it the way that I want to do it, these are the strategies that work for me, that have helped me to break out of the mold from the way that I was raised. So the first strategy is to mentally reframe the situation. These are the things that I am telling myself in the back of my head, not only on a daily basis, but also in the moment, like when it's happening, when my child is on the floor kicking and screaming in front of me. These are the mantras that I'm repeating in the back of my mind to help myself remain calm. And there are some of the things that I have read and learned about over the last couple of years that have really stuck with me because I've seen the truth in them over time. And so I just want to share them with you in the hopes that maybe they help some of you guys. So one of them is your child is not giving you a hard time, they are having a hard time. If they are in the middle of a tantrum, they're not doing it to get under your skin. They are doing it because they literally just cannot control themselves in that moment. They themselves are having a hard time and they need your help. Which leads into the next one that I always think of, and that is misbehavior is your child's way of telling you they need help. Often we tend to think of misbehavior as something that our child is doing purposefully. They have some kind of a malintention behind their choices. At least for young children, that is almost certainly not the case. Your young child misbehaving is literally a cry for help. They need your guidance. So if you can find it in your heart to see it that way in the moment, it really helps to diffuse some of those feelings that you might start to feel bubbling up as soon as the tantrum begins. Another one that I find helpful is to remind myself that this is not an emergency. This too shall pass. Oftentimes in the heat of the moment, it triggers that fight or flight response and we feel like something needs to be done right then and there, or else somehow it's a reflection on us as a parent. And we really have to help ourselves to not think like that. Unless there is actually an emergency at hand where your child's safety is concerned, most of the time, the situation really isn't an emergency, even though it feels that way. So if you can remind yourself of that in the moment, it can help you to pause for just a moment and take a step back and look at things a little bit differently and perhaps not make you feel so flustered. And also the this too shall pass part of it is that your child's emotions are like a roller coaster. They're gonna go up, they ramp up, they reach a plateau, but eventually they're going to come back down again. It's not going to be like this forever, which it feels like that again in the moment, but if you can remind yourself that it will pass, it'll be okay. And then finally, I find that sometimes asking myself little questions as reminders can be really helpful too. Like, is this kind? Did I say that respectfully? Is this the kind of parent that I want to be? Is this the kind of parent that I want my children to remember me as when they're older? And sometimes I'll think to myself, wow, no, that's not. And it just kind of snaps me out of it and helps me get back on the right track again. The second strategy that I like to use to help myself remain calm is to pause and breathe. And I know this sounds super cliche, like, oh, just take a few deep breaths, but it really is helpful. If you're able to remember to do it, number one, and then to practice it over time, it does become second nature. This is not something that I ever used to do, but I find myself doing it more and more now, and it is really helpful. So when I'm faced with a really tough situation with my child, I will actually pause for a moment. Instead of going with that knee-jerk reaction again, just pause. Often I will close my eyes because just not seeing the situation is also helpful. And then I will breathe, just like 1 or 2 cleansing breaths just to help reestablish my own bodily rhythms, to lower my blood pressure a little bit and to try to dampen down that feeling that I felt rising up inside. And by doing that, you're giving yourself just those couple of extra moments that you really need to help yourself regulate again so that you can respond in a way that you actually want to and not in a way that you'll regret later. Now, after I have paused and taken a breath, I then open my eyes and try to take another moment or two before I actually respond to just observe the situation for what it is. If you can observe your child as exactly that, a small human being who does not have a fully developed brain yet, who doesn't have all of the life experiences that you do to help her decide on how best to respond in any given situation, if you can see it for that, exactly what it is, then oftentimes that can help you to dial it back a little bit and to find that calm place before you actually intervene and respond. The third strategy is to seek first to understand. Oftentimes we rush into situations assuming that we know what's going on or assuming that we know what our child's motivation was for their poor behavioral choice. And in reality, most of the time we don't have 100% of the story, especially if we weren't even in the room when it all began. This one is especially helpful if you have more than one child in the house, because oftentimes fights break out, things happen when you're not in the room and you don't have the entire story, and so you can't just go in there thinking you know everything right off the bat. You really do have to get to the root of what actually happened first so that you can then move forward with problem solving. But this also applies to single children. Sometimes you might wrongfully assume what your child was up to, and what looks like misbehavior was actually just their curiosity. So when I seek first to understand from a practical point of view, how I do that is I will go over to where my child is. I will get down on their level so that I can actually look them in the eye, person to person, as opposed to, like hulking over them, which automatically feels a little bit more authoritarian. But I will get down, look them in the eyes, and then sometimes I'll ask questions, but more importantly, I will try to listen neutrally. I will listen to what my child is telling me and try to hear their side of it first, and try to do so with as little or no judgment as possible. Because again, sometimes we get super worked up and frustrated before we even realize what's going on. And so that's something that we completely have the power to avoid happening. Now, let's say your child is having one of the most epic meltdowns that you have ever seen, and you are literally at your breaking point. You have tried reminding yourself of all the things, or maybe you just can't bring yourself to do it in that moment because it's so intense. You have tried to pause and breathe, but you still feel that tension rising up inside of you, and you're like, I'm about to lose my cool. That is the time that you need to take a break. And that is my fourth strategy. Now, whenever possible, if you have a partner, I like to tag myself out and tag my partner in so that I can go and just get away for a minute, remove myself from the situation physically, because that's sometimes what you just need to do, and leave my partner to kind of come in and be the more benevolent force because they have not been involved in the situation up to that point, and allow myself to take a break while they do that. And then when I'm feeling calmer, I can come back into the situation and handle it in a respectful way. But I know that not everybody has a partner available to do that. And I certainly have times when my partner isn't available and it's just me. So when that happens, of course, your first obligation is to make sure that your child is going to be safe wherever you're leaving them while you're taking your short break for a few minutes. You don't want to leave them outside, to their own devices. Make sure that they're in a relatively safe space. But then you just need to physically remove yourself for a few minutes. Sometimes that is all it takes, is just getting away, having a few moments of solitude to help you regain your composure. It could be as simple as just going into the bathroom and shutting the door for a minute. It could be going and making yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Maybe you have like your favorite cozy spot on the couch or a special chair where you tend to feel very relaxed and you want to go sit in that favorite spot for a few minutes. Or maybe you just need to lie down in your bed for a few minutes. Whatever it is, get yourself out of there. Let your child know, just very kindly and gently, that you need to leave for a few minutes to help yourself feel calm again, but that you will be back, and then go. Give yourself that time that you need to find your calm again so that you can actually see the situation from an outside perspective, quite literally, because you're not in the middle of it anymore. And oftentimes that is just enough space to help yourself maintain composure. And then of course, once you're confident that you're feeling better and that you can be that calming force for your child, then you can go back in and work on figuring things out in a respectful way. My fifth and final strategy is to take time for yourself every single day. Now, I know this is a really tall order because it often feels like we don't have enough time for ourselves. We barely even have time to take a shower or brush our teeth, let alone carve out time for self-care. Like, who are you kidding? But really, if you can find even just 5 minutes in your day, every single day, that you can look forward to, that is time just for you, you will be so much better of a parent for it. The 5 minutes is pretty easy to carve out if you can just forget about some of the chores and the daily tasks for 5 minutes, that's it. And instead of tending to the laundry or the dishes, let them sit and go take 5 minutes for you. It's really that simple. And then, as you get used to it, you can expand that time so that it's longer than just 5 minutes. But start small, do whatever you can. By taking the time for yourself, you are going to be a much better parent because you're going to be in a much better mental and physical place, depending on what your self-care is, but you'll be in a much better place to respond to your child in a respectful way. I'm sure you've all heard at this point of the advice that you need to put your own oxygen mask on first. And it really is so true because when you are running on a lack of sleep, when you have not had your coffee or tea or whatever, or if you haven't, gotten to do anything fun lately, you just feel like you're just, on this daily vicious cycle of the same thing over and over, it really starts to breed resentment. You start to grow to dislike the state of living that you're in. And then when something happens with your child, then you tend to snap much faster. Whereas if you are feeling relaxed and rejuvenated and you're feeling like, yes, I get to look forward to this me time that I have later this afternoon, it really allows you to feel a lot more relaxed and like you can roll with the punches when something happens with your child. And so even the smallest little chunks of time that you can find, they do add up, and yes, they do make a difference. So just some ideas for you for self-care in case you're like, I have no idea beyond my morning cup of coffee what you mean by that. Things that you might find helpful to try to fit into your routine every single day somewhere along the way. I actually have a list because I came up with quite a few of them, so I'll just read them to you really quickly. You might read a book. You might enjoy a hobby or take up a new hobby if you don't have one. Again, that coffee or tea, maybe before the kids get up so that you've got 10 or 15 minutes to yourself before you have to get started with the day. Maybe going to a daily or weekly workout or some kind of a class. Maybe it was something you did before you had kids that you want to get back into, what have you. Something new you want to try, but having something to go to that's outside of your own home. Or maybe it's just something that you do at home while your kids are there, but it's still something for you. You can also go for a walk by yourself or sit on your porch for a little bit. Maybe you can watch a show by yourself or with a partner, or make a point of it to take a nice, long, hot, relaxing bath on a regular basis. Like bust out the bath bombs and the oils and the candles and the music, whatever makes you feel like you're relaxed. But go all out and make a point of it every single week. I also know that some of you find a lot of calm in journaling and meditation, so that's something to think about. And perhaps most importantly, and this is one that I am trying to make a point of for my own self-care, and that is to go to bed early. Give yourself the gift of sleep. I definitely had a point a couple of months ago where I felt like I was on the edge of a nervous breakdown, and I realized it was because I was running on a severe lack of sleep. And I immediately rectified the situation and felt 110% better almost immediately, like the next day. So sleep really is important. If you've been staying up late and you're a night owl, see what you can do to fit some more sleep into your routine. Oh, and one more idea for you as far as when to fit in your self-care. If you have a baby that naps, that is golden self-care time. Do not do chores. Yes, I'm shaking my finger at you because I've been there. Don't do chores during your baby's nap. Use that time for self-care. You will thank yourself so much for it. The dishes and the laundry can wait. You can do those while your baby watches. Maybe they're old enough to kind of get involved and help you. Do it when they're awake and save that precious sleep time for a little extra you time. Now, if you have children that are not napping, I would highly recommend instituting some daily quiet time if you have not tried that yet, because it is incredible for everyone, not just for you. It's also great for your children to have some rest and relaxation time at some point in the middle of their day. But that is great time for you to sit down and have your own quiet time where you do engage in a little bit of self-care. Okay, so before I end this video, I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is, what do I do if I've done all of these things and yet I still manage to lose my cool? I mess up big time with my children. And like I said earlier, it happens to all of us. Just accept it. Accept that you are going to make mistakes as a parent, and remind yourself that your children don't need you to be perfect. It's okay. In fact, it's helpful for them to see you making mistakes, because once a mistake has been made, that paves the way for you to make amends and to model for them what that looks like. So if you mess up, admit it. go to your child and apologize, get down on their level and make it up to them. Do whatever it is that you need to do to rectify the situation. Like I said, it is good modeling for them, but it is also an incredibly impactful way to repair any ruptures that you might have caused by accident in your relationship. Okay, friends, so those are 5 ways to stay calm as a parent that are tried and true. They are strategies that I use on a daily basis, and they do work. If you have any tips of your own, please feel free to share those with us in the comments down below. I'm sure there are plenty of parents out there who would be interested to know what they are. If you are interested in learning more about Montessori at home or positive discipline parenting, I offer a couple of e-courses that walk you through it step by step. And I also just wrote my very first book, which is actually about to launch in just a couple of weeks on March 1st. It is called The Montessori Home: Create a Space for Your Child to Thrive. So I will leave links to all of that in the description box down below in case you're interested in checking it out. And if you are new to my channel, I also wanted to let you know that this video is part of a much larger series on this YouTube channel called Montessori at Home, which is aimed at providing practical tips and advice for busy parents like you and I for implementing Montessori at home with our children. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in watching more of, then you might consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video, because I do upload a new one just like this one every single week. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.